Right, so we're going to have a quick chat about stages 6 and 7, really, but how it actually falls into stage 1 and stage 0. Okay, it's a continuous loop. That was the whole idea of the new graphic, and it's actually it's about the soft skills. So this is an example of leadership and how to really sort of get a particular subject or a particular issue through into the practice, but actually how to further your careers as well. So again, it could be anything. So this is an example of how one would go about it. So starting off, I'm going to take you back to 1963 very quickly. Part M, so it used to be Part M, called feedback. And at the end there you can see studies of buildings in use. That was 1963. Fast forward to 2007, it was repeated again. This time it was L3. Now, it was about 50 years difference, and the one thing is, the conclusion really is we didn't really do it as a profession. Now, it's quite scandalous, really, when you think about all the other kind of sort of, not so much construction, but all the other kind of industries. They make sure that they do the feedback loop. They understand what the product is, how it's performing, how it's reacting over time, and then they actually feed that back into the design loop. We don't do it consistently. So as a leadership, in terms of now we've got the new plan of work, we've got you guys, that's my one thing is really take this forward, run with it. You will be the first generation to do it properly, hopefully. Right, what's happened, and you'll recognise all these from your buildings, little things. Now this is a photograph of a reception area. The lights, this was taken at 2 o'clock in the morning. Everything was on. Now I'm going to be sort of giving examples of, it's generally sort of energy and sustainability issues, but this could actually go into other aspects of kind of functionality of buildings. There's controls that nobody understands. It's a pair of legs, so it is a corridor. Okay, so we don't know what it's doing. Controls that you can't see. There's meters actually facing the wall, so you can actually see it. You can see the sort of the occupants here actually providing their own sort of shading with stick-on bits. So that's not working. And then there's actually air tightness issues. Now this slide's important because this actually summarises this feedback loop. This was taken by a chap called Bill Bordas. About 1980s, it's a building that did one of the first air tightness tests on big, large scale smoke test, and its air tightness kind of target, I think, was, or whatever it was, about 15 in those days, meter cube per meter squared. This was actually over 30, and this one slide actually made sure air tightness became part of building regs. So it's that thing, it's actually going to your buildings, photographing it, seeing how it's going, and then actually learning from it. Performance gap, we've heard about it very quickly. This is an example of how we fool ourselves collectively as a design team. You can see the top there, it's a mixed mode head office claim performance down there, so it's about 15 kilograms CO2 per meter squared. And the actual basically was here after 2 years. So it's a 5.5 times difference between the predicted and the actual. And there's many reasons for that. I'm not going to go into the detail, but actually we've got to understand, we've got to learn how, what's happened there, okay? And part of the reason is this, is actually we've got lots of things going on. Commissioning, at the end of the building project, everybody rushes. And I'm sure on site, all your contractors trying to finish on time. This PC limit is where all the penalties start. They're rushing, they're going to put together. Commissioning is left to the last minute, okay? And then what happens is there's lots of things after that. You can see here. And the more complex buildings we're creating now, we're creating a sort of a latent defect for the client, really. And so what we're trying to work with Soft Landings Group is we get rid of practical completion as this kind of sort of deadline, but as a point in time when you manage it, and then you actually introduce kind of sort of stage things towards the end of the defects liability period. Now, Ministry of Justice, they actually run a 3-year defect period, because the more complex buildings, especially with prisons, then you need more time to make sure all the systems are working. That's led to government soft landings, which was launched very quietly on the 1st of April. So all public funded, centrally government public buildings now have to run a government soft landings process. Effectively what it is a series of measurement and verification. So you set your metrics as a design team and you will be asked to contribute to that. And generally these can be energy or other aspects like that. But actually functionality aspects are in there as well. But that's depending on your building type. Okay, so there's different functionality metrics for an office versus a hospital. Then you measure it through the design process, and at the end, then you're actually perhaps judged on that. There's no penalties that I think are going to be in the first few years linked to that in terms of these, but once you agree a certain performance with your client, with the public client, then that might actually sort of end in penalties at the end of the time. But there's no penalties for the start. Right, and all that is then fed into our new plan of work, and particularly we see 6 and 7, linking back to obviously sort of 1963, it's the same thing. It's a feedback loop. Then you run across horizontally, and you've got your handover strategy. So we did actually try and get soft landings in the plan of work when we were sort of doing it with RBA, but our members didn't really sort of take kindly to the word soft landings. They didn't really understand, it was a bit jargon. So we've called it handover strategy. I don't know if that helps, but again, we're really sort of asking you to sort of think right at day one, right at the beginning, what handover strategy is and how the building will be used. These are kind of the things within your, if you look at your RBA sort of practice guide, these are the normal things you've got to think about when you're doing sort of handover and closeout. So that, again, the very sort of simple things there. But then what other sustainability issues should be in there? So I'm going to pose that question, we'll come back to in a minute. Similarly, sort of our stage 7, we've got in use, and it says in the guide, RBA guide, a post-occupancy evaluation. And it says feedback into stage 0, which all sounds good. But what do you mean by a post-occupancy evaluation? It doesn't really exactly give you some guidance on that. So I'll give you a kind of couple of ideas on that one. So coming back to stage 6, this is actually soft landings, so it's BISRIA soft landings, and we've been developing this for a number of years. It was actually started by an architect, Mark Way, who used to be chairman of RMGM, and then he went on to the CIC, so he's been very much in the background, and he developed this with a client of his, Cambridge University. So it's not rocket science, really. So stage 1, you've got inception briefing. Really what you're saying is there, understand your client's requirements, benchmark, and go and visit other things and describe what it is. And there's lots of things, so lots of variables there. Then you actually sort of design and construct, but using these. But you've got to reality check yourself. And as a team or get independent advice, and you've just got to understand how that building is going to work, how it's going to operate. And that might involve other people in that. Pre-handover is absolutely critical. In the 3 months, perhaps 6 months more complex buildings, up to the point of practical completion, this key task that we always forget to do as a design team, and we'll touch on these in a minute. And stage 4, initial aftercare. The original Part M, back in 1963, talked about this. This initial aftercare is really important. The first 3 months of handing over the building, as I'm sure lots of you understand, is very critical. Lots of snags, lots of issues going to come up about operation. We've got to be there to help the client. And then lastly, stage 5, which is extended aftercare, which is up to 3 years, and it's actually doing that post-occupancy evaluation at the end of that time. So, coming back to our slide, what other sustainable issues should be included? It's really this, it's kind of mapping over soft landings onto our RBA plan of work. Particularly, I'm just going to look at this in a bit more detail, so 3, 4, and 5. And that maps into the last few stages. So stage 3, I'm not going to read all this out. It's going to be in the pack, I believe. Yeah, so you can read it at your leisure. It's looking at how the building's going to operate. It's about a building readiness program. How is the building going to be handed over to the client? How are they going to use it? It's a migration strategy. Who's going to go in? Who's going to maintain what? Then there's training of interfaces. How are you going to train people to operate the building? How to manage the spaces? Things like that. And obviously the user guides. And it isn't about user guides which sit on a shelf for O&M and the building manager comes in. It's about occupants. You've got to think about the occupant, the person using the building. So that's kind of stage 3, initial pre-handover. Initial aftercare really is, it's quite simple. Just stay on site. So at least nominate one of your persons. So normally it's the project architect, I normally ask. That first 3 months, I make sure I kind of plan into my kind of resource schedule. There's going to be a bit of time, at least 1 day a week on site after pre-handover, after handover, and you make sure you're on there. For the more complex buildings, you'll find that your client will insist on that anyway, but really plan for that. And it really is walkabouts about communication with actually the users, but the building manager. Make sure you're aware of actually how your building's being perceived and used. And then long-term aftercare, it really is a structured, rigorous look of how the building is being used. It isn't enough for us to just go in and get anecdotal evidence, which we've done for the last 60 years, and hope that we understand the building. It's about rigorous POE. Lots of guidance on that, so go to the BISRIA soft landings. It's not sort of an architectural sort of destination, I suppose, but actually there's some really good stuff on there. It's all free to download as well if you register. Into POE, very quickly, what we're talking about, minimum POE, post-occupancy evaluation, is two measures, objective measures and subjective measures. The objective measure, energy use, that's basically what it's down to. Whether you think it's part of an architectural sort of aspiration or not, then I think it is. And there's a kind of sort of there's a SIBC guide, which is TM22, Technical Memorandum 22, which you can use to actually calculate the energy use in reality. But actually, I'm not anticipating that all of us are going to do it as architects. That's the engineer's kind of forte, and you will probably get independent advice there. It's best to get an independent person to do this as well. A team will actually, discriminate a little bit. They might not give the true story. So that's the energy story. Subjective measures, comfort, occupant satisfaction, productivity. There's a tool that has been used for a number of years, and it's the Building Use Satisfaction Survey. It's now owned by Eyre, but originally it was developed by Adrian Lehman, a researcher in York. And they've got a database of about 1,000 buildings now. And they ask specific questions of the users, and they understand objectively what the reactions are of that building. And it's very in-depth. And with this kind of case study, you can actually benchmark your building against this. So it's very, very interesting stuff. And the government soft landings, I think, will be expecting the minimum of these two things as part of their kind of aspiration. Now, we've done sort of various kind of occupant satisfaction surveys of our buildings. This is John Medeski School in Bristol. It's part of the Building the Schools for the Future programme. And we actually got an independent person to come in. You won't be able to read this, but ask very kind of fundamental questions about how the students and staff actually approach the building in terms of actually its wider context, and how it was in terms of legibility, safety, feelings of kind of sort of belonging and identity. Territory is very important as well. So it's kind of psychological questions as well as functional questions. This is the outdoor questions. And then obviously we got energy as well. So this gives us an understanding. And we use this in-house when we're actually designing new schools. So it's actually on the server, it's a case study note, and we make sure that everybody references that if they're going to pull off another school. This building is interesting because it's not one of ours, but John Miller Architects, Elizabeth Fry building, was built in the 1990s. It's a very kind of sort of simple building. It's small windows, punched, lots of insulation, well before all passive house, but it probably achieve a passive house certification at this kind of stage now. It's a thermodeck system, which means it's blowing air through the hollow core concrete slabs, and really it was tuned up. This is what really soft landings is about, is fine-tuning your building. Its operation is the best performing building in the 1,000 building data set for the last 20 years. And we'll see there, it sits round about here, which is about 35 kilograms per CO2 per metre squared, which is actually really, really good performance. It's 55% less than the average best practice, and it's a whopping 75% less than the typical building type, which is a type 3 office building, which is actually pretty close to our 80% target for CO2 reduction that we should all be trying to achieve in buildings going forward. Occupant satisfaction, this is actually two surveys, almost 20 years apart, 50 years apart. The green is good, it's measured along all these kind of variations. And then 2011 there was a bit more red, and what was happening is basically they've increased the density of the building by 20%. You'll find that density, as soon as you get into the occupant satisfaction, density is a key thing. Okay? When you pack too many people into a room that isn't designed for it, perhaps like this, it gets a bit hot, it may be not working very well. And our user group, which we've got about 30 members from contractors right the way through to architects. This is Architects' new building, again for University of East Anglia, which actually is taken to the next level in terms of sustainability. It's a passive house, it's a decade rated building, it's got everything in it, and it's built from straw bales, which is absolutely fantastic. So we're waiting to see what the performance of this is. Right, coming back to the question, so what are you going to go back and change in your practice? Well, I suggest the first thing is targets. You set your targets, okay? And then I would really encourage you to have a look at the M4I targets right from Egan time. They've been actually sort of put on a shelf for the last 20 years, but I think it's time to dust them off, especially with the government soft landings, and have a look at them. So it's operational energy. The question is, you don't want, like the health and safety chat, basically you don't want lots of kind of lists, you just want a few key indicators. Operational energy, embodied energy, biodiversity is another one, water and waste. I think that's kind of the core ones. Then I use this to map across a matrix, sustainability matrix. Right at day one, you can actually sort of target this with your client, and you can use this as a design tool. Then the second thing is, as a team, you've got to kind of sort of really know what the engineer should be doing as well. And I must say, I'm being let down, and I'm sure there's a bit of stories there, but MEP engineers, I'm struggling with them a little bit. I need them to kind of sort of up their game, so I need to kind of get them to sort of protect their scope to make sure that I'm designing better, okay? So there's lots of things there. TM54, if you go away, one thing, ask your engineers to do a TM54 at the beginning of your project. That will help about sort of predicting the final energy use. We use lots of tools, IES, and I'm trying to get the younger architects to sort of model this as well, so where they're doing the rhino and grasshopper regeneration, I'm going to ask them to do sort of more environmental modelling as well. Little slide in terms of cost. This is something I put together for the user group. It's really sort of, this shouldn't cost much, so in terms of this extra activities. It really is for me, it's doing better design. It's designing in terms of best practice. So really for me, all the beginning stages shouldn't cost any extra. It's really about doing it well. But I do take an independent consultant in who actually understands particular building types in terms of how they work, especially from an energy point of view. So really this is where the additional cost comes in. And then really what it comes down to is a few more meetings on site where you really need the full design team there. So it works out about between 0.1 and 1%, which is actually less than if you're trying to do BREEAM projects as well. Okay, coming back, just summarising, so feeding back into stages 0 and 1. So what you're saying, right at day one, you've got to design for handover and operation. You've got to benchmark similar buildings, so just going sort of see what your client's trying to do, a university or school or whatever, take them to the best, a range of different types of schools, and that gets you to fine-tune the brief. Set realistic, stretched operational performance targets. A bit of a mouthful. When you set a target, you don't want to set the target, but you don't want to set a target that's ridiculous. Okay, you want to set something that's stretched, a little bit difficult, but still achievable. And then actually think about soft landings as just one way of how to achieve this handover strategy for government soft landings and also for our stages 6 and 7. And then there's obviously key lessons to understand there. Okay, just finish off. That's the physical things. And then working with Neo is a bit more difficult to kind of tease out the softer skills in terms of what this means for leadership. So I've had a go. So basically for me, it's like the feedback, understanding feedback and making sure it's part of your design philosophy is the biggest paradigm shift. It's a different way of thinking. So we think we know what we're doing, and we sort of move on to the next design. But that is the biggest change. So what this means, you've got to be open with yourself and your peers. You've got to be holistic. You've got to think about all the wider things. But you've got to be honest with yourself. Okay, you can't fool yourself in terms of that. How to do it, R&D process. It's about your R&D process within your practice. It's about POE. It's about setting up POE. But actually, there's some real good marketing benefits that comes into this as well. But it's thought leadership, and that's the leadership aspect. If you can create yourself in a position where you are the go-to person for these stages and understanding how building work, that's it. I've done my job. Pitfalls, client politics. It's a minefield. So as soon as you ask how the building is going to operate in reality, it's like treading on eggshells or mines. And confidentiality is a big part of that. So you've got to steer your way through this. Next one is advocacy. So it's really top down. How do you convince your directors, your board directors, to kind of change the way they work? So really, it's kind of sort of a little bit of choosing your director that you like, or it's kind of quite amenable. Lobbying, so in terms of chats about lots of things, maybe setting up sort of CPD events or whatever, or maybe actually presenting your building, going back into your building, understanding some interesting, sort of good positive stories. But actually, there's maybe some lessons learned there, which actually are kind of quite key for the practice as well. Pitfalls, office politics. So I think that's the key to leadership. Over-promising, under-delivering. So again, there's a balance there. And then it's this thing about non-fee earning. And this is absolutely critical. Most practices won't think this is part of the core delivery, but I think it is. Without this, we can't get better. And finally, influence. And this is the bottom up. This is about your peers and your kind of, sort of project teams. So it really is sort of thinking these in the right environment for R&D. It's linking your project teams with R&D. It's like giving that lessons learned, so really understanding how the project went at all levels. A pitfall is really in this one is burying bad news. So nobody likes washing, doing the washing open. It really is. You've got to kind of sort of try and make a positive experience with this. It isn't a blame culture. It is about understanding what happened, thinking through, and how to sort of develop this. So it's a different type of mindset. Then a couple of last slides really. So in terms of principles and process, that all feeds back into, you've got perhaps a clear vision of what you want to do here. It's about emphasising the triple bottom line of benefits. This is kind of sort of in a holistic sense as well as the business sense. Business development is absolutely key as well. This is where I think feedback, this is where actually all the car industry, whatever, you name it, that feedback, that R&D really kind of creates the benefit of the next generation of buildings or products. And we're doing a project with Dyson as well for the new R&D labs. And they spend 300 million, maybe 400 million a year on R&D to keep them at number one. If you ask the percentage of that, I think the turnover is about 3 billion, so that's a good sort of 10%. So what's the turnover of architectural practice for R&D? So ask that question, it'd be very interesting at the end. Process really is about updating your process methodologies. This is back into your 9001, 14001 sort of processes. Updating your marketing text, bid text, everything. You try and get that message out that you're trying to learn from your practice. And there's some good benefits there. And this is the benefits, really. And this is a little graph that I use, Urban Land Institute from 1990s. It was looking at LEED Platinum buildings, and then the benefits. And there's some massive things here. So energy is obviously good. Running costs of the building is double the energy costs. But this is outweighed by health and productivity. So the well-being is the kind of the core language that a lot of developers, a lot of clients are really interested in now. So really kind of develop the wellness aspect of it. But business benefits, continuous development, clients like to hear that. Better buildings we're going to create, less commercial risk, efficient design process, trying to do your design quicker and faster and easier. Social benefits, again, fit for purpose. We can't say fit for purpose in obviously outside this room, but that's what we're talking about, trying to make better buildings how they're used by the tenant. Placemaking evidence, indoor air quality is becoming a massive issue as well. And environmental benefits, I think they speak for themselves. This is the only way really to kind of sort of hit our carbon reduction targets. And I think that's it. Thanks very much.
Great. That was quite a canter through quite a complex field, actually. But there's a kind of subtext today, which is all about advocacy. So I was thinking, it seems almost unthinkable that the car or the aircraft industry would not be concerned about how its products perform. And we know from our business benchmarking data that actually repeat clients are the single most important source of work for architects. So managing those relationships, understanding how their buildings perform are really important. But you gave us a kind of potted history in a way of the failure of the plan of work. You said there's been talk of post-occupancy on a number of occasions previously. So I was just going to say, can you persuade us why it's going to happen this time, why this time's going to be different? We're going to take it seriously.
Well, I can't say categorically. I think it's. I'm going to look at everybody's reactions here. If there's people nodding off, then I know it won't happen. But I think I can see the reactions. It's really the only way we can do it as a profession is actually if everybody kind of buys into it. So I think that's the bit that's kind of missing historically. And I think it's also it's this kind of sort of very delicate sort of balancing act with kind of the client politics and how you develop that. The key thing is there as well is the lack of definition of what we mean by post-occupancy evaluation. I think that's hampered all the last 60 years. And I think we're now at a point where we know the minimum of a good post-occupancy evaluation. So pick that up and I think we can run with it. But I can't do it myself. It's I say everybody around here. So
yeah. Do you think the public sector is going to drive it, or is that a mistake to rely on the government's adoption of soft landings, etc.?
Yes, this is where my politics will probably come out a little bit. The Deregulation Act has definitely put sustainability, on the back burner. It's very much going to it's the industry has got to lead now, so that's understood. But that was no different to when I started 20 odd years ago. But the key thing is that government soft landings is one of the small things that has gone through. That's actually now mandated. Now, when we sort of heard about the Deregulation Act, none of us in our body actually raised any sort of major issues or questions or whatever. We just put our head down below the parapet. George Osborne probably didn't even know about it. So hopefully it's now through. But really, it's coming. So in terms of soft lands, the question I forgot to ask was, how many people do know about soft landings? So if I could maybe have a show of hands. So that's quite healthy. I'm quite glad. So you've now the rest of everybody, and you now know about it now. So I've got 100% coverage. But the key thing is going through. So it's central government, all local government are now actually doing it as a matter of course. Universities are now asking for it. So it is actually coming through the public sector, and hopefully developers. There's a good sort of kind of they're leading. So hopefully it's going to happen.
I was just going to go off into a little byway, because we've talked in a way today about a lot of things as kind of collective issues for the profession and the wider industry, but part of Future Leaders is also about career development, and you kind of hinted at something, Gary, about the kind of the career development opportunities that can come out of having a particular expertise or a particular knowledge. I just wonder whether you might say a little bit more about those opportunities. It's a very competitive world in architecture, both between practices and within practices, actually. And can this give you a competitive edge?
I think it can. I think that I'm a general practitioner, all-rounder, so I do right from concept right to the end. But throughout my career, I've actually sort of always done sustainability. And for me, it's all about sort of, it's not, part of it is about saving the planet, but actually it's about creating more meaningful, authentic works of architecture. So if you really work through that, I'm trying to strip away mechanical ventilation, whatever, trying to make the architecture the fore. And it's helped me in terms of my progression, but actually you can't get typecast. So there's a very balancing act. Definitely specialise. So pick one thing that you really are interested in, and really take that to a very high degree of knowledge. But you've got to watch being typecast. If you want to be an all-rounder, if you want to be a specialist, that's absolutely fine. But really watch that. So, but I really think it's important.